Chapter 1. Philadelphia, 1723. It was one of those days that struck the 15-year-old Deborah Reed from time to time. She could work away most mornings without complaint, through heat or cold or even spinning flax, the worst kind of domestic tedium. But then an itch would come up in her, and she couldn't bear to be inside at her work a single minute longer. She'd been scrubbing a hearth spill and had gone to the door with the bucket of dirty water, intent on dashing it into the gutter and returning to her task. But the sights and sounds and smells of the street grabbed hold of her. Most of what she saw was the usual drab Quaker gray, but of late Philadelphia had added other colors and tongues: Irish, German, Scots, free Africans, all come to see if it was true, this Quaker promise of peaceable commingling of all peoples and beliefs. Perhaps it was. Deborah looked along Market Street and saw Brock Mueller teasing his oxen along in his usual off-note sing-song. Farther on, past the bakery, John McKay was just sweeping his stoop. Opposite the courthouse, two small Quaker boys chased a loose pig grubbing in the mud for whatever it was loose pigs always grubbed in the mud for, and in the other direction, toward the river, an old Negro woman sat on a crate under the covered market, empty on the off day, rolling a stone between her palms and muttering to herself. Deborah's gaze was about to travel past the old woman to the waterfront and the ever-present masts poking against the sky, when she saw someone coming down the street in her direction. A stranger, not much older than herself, but already tall and broad-backed, with a strong, lively face. His clothes showed the dust of travel, and leaking out of his pockets she spied what looked to be all his worldly goods, a dirty shirt and a pair of stockings. He strode along chewing on a roll while carrying two others beneath his arm, as if determined to keep a full day's ration on tap. Later she would tell this story of her first glimpse of the great Benjamin Franklin, how she, Deborah Reed, stood in the doorway of her father's house on Market Street, looked at this comely young man walking by with his laundry and his rolls, and dismissed him as beneath her notice. But when telling the tale, Deborah always took care to tell the whole of it, that the man had bent down and offered one of his rolls to the old Negro, as if to prove he wasn't in as great a need of it as he looked. When Deborah next saw Franklin, he was standing on her father's stoop asking after a room to let. The rolls and dirty clothes were gone, and he was claiming a fair wage as assistant in a printer's shop. The day was hot, and Deborah had been walking around, limp as a dish rag. But when the stranger appeared on the stoop, she felt herself taking in a little starch. Franklin peered around the father to examine the daughter. "I remember you," he said, "standing in the doorway with your dirty washwater." Deborah opened her mouth to snap back something about Franklin's dirty linen, but she took note of a look in Franklin's eye that told her he expected her to do it, that he'd laid out the dirty washwater just so she'd have a chance to lay out the dirty linen, that he was proud of how far and how fast he'd come and wanted her father to know it. Deborah stayed silent. Deborah's father let Franklin the room, but at first Deborah hardly noticed. It seemed Franklin had already made a lot of friends, and he met nearly nightly with them at one or another tavern. But after a time he began to appear at the kitchen table or the family fire as if he'd always been part of it. From that point onward, life in the Reed home changed. One morning Deborah came in from hanging the wash to find Franklin at the table, filling glasses with different amounts of water from a jug. He caught Deborah's hand as she walked by, spread her fingers apart, dipped her forefinger in the water, and guided it to the rim of the glass, moving it around and around. Then the glass began to vibrate, the finger to tingle, the glass to let out a sound like a cat fallen into a molasses barrel. Franklin added water to the glass.